And then before we get started, we put on the consultation form on the website. We start recording training sessions and consultation. Okay. So I read briefly here. You did some positive, fear-free work, and then he was attacked at one point by.
Yeah. So we started doing. Like, she wouldn't go into the facility, or like she just gets nervous in places where she like sees and smells dogs. So then we started doing private lessons in one of the trainer's backyards, and it didn't go well, as you read. So then I actually, after that, that trainer then told me that she didn't think that she could improve without going on anxiety meds, which I didn't want to do. So I talked to like a friend on Instagram who trains service dogs, and she recommended that I do a prong collar. And so I decided to try that kind of as like my last resort initially, and ended up being what gave us the most progress of anything that we had done. So, but I've kind of like hit a plateau with my own work doing that. So I wanted to get like more guidance, and then hopefully some e-collar learning as well.
Okay. And then with so fill me in on what you were trying to address, and then the difference that you've seen with the prong collar.
Yeah, so it was mostly leash reactivity.
Okay.
So just like typical like on walks, like lunging, barking at other dogs, and so originally like I was like I had switched her to a harness because with her martingale, like she was pulling at it off with her neck and like choking herself, and that concerned me. And then of course like having her in like I didn't want to use a front clip harness just because like I had heard from other people like about it affecting their gait and like musculature and things like that. I don't know if that's true, but in the
with this particular breed or dogs in general?
What?
With this particular breed or dogs?
Yeah, I had heard it from other Brazoi people.
Okay.
Yeah, so she was on a back clip, which it's funny because, then one time I wasn't planning to walk her, but we were just in the backyard, and then like was taking her to the bathroom, and she was on her back clip, and she was like way more reactive than she was like normally. So it was, definitely has frustration from that, but yeah, so mostly just working on reactivity. I'd also like to work on recall ultimately, because it would be really nice to take her to, I want to get her in a place with recall and her comfort around other dogs, that I can like take her to those like multi-acre fenced-in dog parks for fun.
Sure. Suburbs or whatever.
I'd really like her to do that because I know she would really enjoy that, but I don't want to do that if she doesn't have recall, obviously.
And then with the prong collar, what have you seen in terms of progress and change in behavior?
Well, when I added the prong collar, I also started doing like more structured walks as well. But I just have noticed that she is way more like calm and knows that she can like look to me to like kind of like watch out for her in general, and that was along with like some like structure I added at home as well, but it's just like more direct communication with her. It felt almost like when I put this on that it was the first time she realized that there was another person attached to the end of the leash.
And how did you, I'm assuming you worked on a healing exercise or something?
I guess like she'll walk like loosely in a kind of heel position, but I guess it's not really, like she has like a release cue to like sniff and stuff, but I've been working on getting her to recognize like a formal cue for that, but
for the release or for the heel?
For the heel.
Okay.
But she kind of defaults to that on walks.
Okay. Anything else?
I guess it's mostly about, I really want to like kind of close that threshold at which she does get uncomfortable, and just, I don't know. Yeah, mostly that. I also like, I got her at age 2, and she lived with other dogs before that. We've gone on like structured walks with like friends' dogs before, and she's done fine and enjoyed it, but, so I know that she's like not completely incapable of coexisting with other dogs, but yeah.
When's the last time you tried socializing with the dog?
Like a new one or?
Yeah.
Let's see. That was probably back in, like October.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been a while. She's only
Nice.
met like a few other dogs. I don't have a lot of friends with dogs, so.
How'd that go in October?
It was rough at first. I was also nervous because it was another Borzoi and I met the person on Instagram, so I was like trying to meet up with them in Chicago, and like there was just like a lot going on in the area. I had never been to it before, and then there was like other things going on, but ultimately by the end, like she had kind of calmed down, and like we were across the street from each other, and after like watching the other dog for a while, she kind of like wanted to head over there, and like was very tentative about it, but by the end she was like a little worried about it, but she was comfortable enough to stand next to him and like sniff him and check him out.
That's good. Anything else?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. So maybe before reaching out, you've done research on this, know that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, my primary tool of choice is e-collar. All my dogs over 6 months are trained on e-collar. Because off the bat, you get off-leash control. 2, it's very easy to learn for the owner. It's very logic and common sense based. Doesn't take a lot of technical skill. It's more their language. Like prong collar is their language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we talk about dog training, you know, positive only, enforce free, whatever, obviously like really tug at people's heartstrings, right? Because everybody wants to believe they can train their dog using positive only or treats or whatever. But realistically speaking, it has the lowest ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the dog is under stress, they're not going to care about the food. If the stimuli is more rewarding than the what you have in your hand, they're apt to do that instead, right? Also, dogs just don't learn that way, really. I mean, they learn obviously, but they themselves don't teach each other that.
Right.
Dogs are all positive punishment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if she got out of line with another dog and that dog wanted to correct her, it would bite her. Mm-hmm. That's positive punishment. They're adding something bad to deter her from repeating behavior. So e-collar, as I like to call it, is a bite on a button. When layered incorrectly, she'll see it as a line of communication. It's okay. As a line of communication, as opposed to like a punisher. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when people think of prong collar or e-collar, they usually, you know, go to these extremes like, oh my God, you're going to hurt the dog and all that stuff. I mean, it's not how it works. Mm-hmm. So with the prong collar, it's a great tool. It's meant to mimic a dog bite. Mm-hmm. That's why it looks how it looks. It can take a bit more technical skill. But then also, if I have a dog that's being reactive and you try to correct them with a prong collar, if they're too far gone in reactivity, mm-hmm. They're not going to care about the correction and then just keep going. So e-collar allows us to also override the dog's reactivity and or stress levels because everything is a press of a button. It's not based on physical strength or technical skill. So it also just makes stuff like that much more easier to address. So here, it sounds pretty simple. You want to kind of further, like how is the reactivity now?
So it's actually probably at the best it's been mm-hmm. so far. We had kind of a bit of a hiccup. There was a dog in my neighborhood who escaped its house and ran across the street to attack her twice, and that set things back a lot. But after a couple months, she's like finally back to.
That's good.
The progress we've made maybe even a little bit further. She seems to be like unbothered when she sees another dog like across the street and things like that. I think she probably has like still has a decent threshold for that. I think that like we wouldn't be able to like walk up on with like 5 feet apart from another dog or anything like that. But I just don't know how to get any closer than that. It seems like as long as she knows the dog can't get to her, she's okay. Because she's even been like, I was living in Chicago until like last fall and moved out to the suburbs, but like there would be situations where we'd walk by somebody's fence and not realize there's a dog there, and she wouldn't really freak out, she'd just want to sniff them. And so it's like she seems to know that if they can't get to her, she's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that's going to work if they're closer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that shouldn't be a problem. The goal would be to be able to walk past a dog, no issues.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think is actually going to be a problem for you.
Mm-hmm.
E-collar really streamlines the process quite a bit. It's just people, the way they think of it or how they think of it tends to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
Because they think they're electrocuting their dog, which that's not how it works at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that. We need to work on the reactivity stuff, which is probably be just a couple of classes. And then you want the recall, of course, which is also a couple of classes. Anything else you're trying to achieve here with Twiggy?
I guess just kind of like her confidence and comfort around other dogs. Again, like if I was to be able to take her to one of those like huge like fenced-in dog parks that I don't need her to play with other dogs by any means, but I want her to be able to handle herself like if something happened and like a dog like approached, because it's, you don't know, you know?
Sure. So that would be the hardest.
Yeah.
So it's more realistic for her to, like, if you had a friend who has a dog, or like that, you know, other person you had met, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you would meet repeatedly because the dog is consistent.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you were to be out at the park and an off-leash dog charged her,
Mm-hmm.
even if it was friendly, you know, she could perceive that as threatening. My dogs are friendly dogs, are social, but if a dog charges them off leash or whatever, runs up to them impolitely, you'll see them get defensive.
Right.
And it's not because they're aggressive, it's just they found that approach to be very disrespectful
Mm-hmm.
and also threatening, so then they just go on the defensive.
Yeah.
So,
I just don't want it to like set her back like it like, you know, like the way it does with the situation in January. A couple months ago with the dog, off-leash dog, like running up to her.
mhm.
I mean, he was small, so he like kind of like maybe nipped at her legs, but he couldn't really do anything to her.
Mhm.
But it like set back her progress like so much. I want her to be able to like, I don't know, like bounce back in cases of not even like going to like a dog park like that, but just, I don't know, just like, I don't know if that's even a thing that you can change, like her resilience to that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not, it's the way I look at it is as, does the dog enjoy themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so let's say you go to the park and you're capable of going to the park, but she's just like stressed,
Yeah.
then it's kind of like pointless, right?
Right.
Now, going to the park to expose her to see will she get over that is different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you don't know until you try,
Right.
right? But then if it's like, yeah, I've been there 100 times and she just does not look like she's having fun, I would say she's probably just not gonna get around to that. She's fine with like walking and running around in an empty field or whatever, but she's
Mhm.
not the type to like be with a bunch of other dogs.
Right.
Because I can't make that happen if that's not her.
Right.
But I don't see why you can't try to see how she takes to it.
Yeah.
Okay?
It would just be nice for her to like be able to run around in like a place like that. But
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it can't
for sure.
happen, it can't happen. But
Yeah, so the way I would look at it is 2 classes on heel. That would give us a really good idea of the reactivity stuff. Okay? So if she can't walk past a dog, then don't think she's gonna be able to, you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of like the precursor. I don't think you're gonna have a problem with that. I think it's gonna be pretty straightforward. The next 2 classes, we will jump into recall. So by class 3, we're already teaching them the return with the e-collar. Now recall tends to take the longest to teach
mm-hmm.
because it requires you to go somewhere, it requires you to have her on the long leash and let her be distracted and chase things or whatever and call her off of those things. Heel tends to be the fastest thing that we teach because most people walk their dog at least 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3 times a day, 7 days a week that you're practicing the heel command. So that tends to be learned very quickly. And then if that kind of sounds, because I'm getting a feel for what you're needing here,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a residual reactivity, the heel, the recall, and then you would like to see what is she capable of,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That sounds what you know. So Mike, I have 3, 6, 9, and 12 week programs. It sounds like you're in the 6 week range. 2 on heel, 2 on recall,
Mm-hmm.
which would leave 2 on socialization. So 1, I would teach you how to socialize her correctly. So even if she weren't to be like a dog park dog, she could be, it's much more likely she could be a dog that would warm up to a friend's dog, warm up to a relative's dog, that she would see on a repeated and or consistent basis. And then class 6 would be like, okay, how does she do in this kind of setting where there's going to be other dogs and stuff? And if she's there and she's doing this, and she's just indifferent, like that's good.
Yeah.
You know, like I can't make her play with dogs, but if
Right.
she's there, she's coexisting, she's not stressed by them, she's just kind of in her own world, and she'll sniff them, they'll sniff her, and they go about their business, that's perfectly fine. Okay, that's technically
Yeah, that's ultimately what I want. Like, I don't need her to play with other dogs. I just want her to be able to take her more places and like her to be okay.
Right. The only issue with those places is, of course, sometimes people do take dogs that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So that's just a risk. It even happens at the dog parks. I've had you know, clients' dogs get attacked at the dog park, like full-on attack.
Yeah.
And then people just grab their dog and go. Like don't even stick around, like is your dog okay or whatever. So unfortunately it happens. But that's where I kind of picture this going. The reason why I don't think the reactivity is going to be that big of a problem is because you've already made good progress with just the Prong. Okay, and then Prong is a great tool. But typically when people use Prong for reactivity, they don't get anywhere. Okay, so I think teaching her how to heel correctly, tightening that up will resolve any residual reactivity that's left. Then we jump into the recall by class 3, and then see how things are going from there. If the reactivity and all that stuff is going like I think it should, we can go into the socialization stuff. Okay, and then once you learn how to socialize her correctly, it's just repeat it when you can. It's nothing that you're teaching her. I'm teaching you, right? This is how you introduce your dog to another dog. This is the things you want to avoid. This is how you know when to move to the next stage in desocialization, so on and so forth. It's really just educating you. And then you go out and you set up doggy dates and play dates and all that stuff, and you just practice, okay? Then the last thing would just be, you know, if you feel really good, you could just go to the preserve yourself and see how she does, you know? And if that's only great, then we can use, you know, the final class for something else.
Okay.
Questions about any of that so far?
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
How much does she weigh?
She's 65 pounds.
65. So the collar I'd recommend for you would most likely be the Dog Trail Black Edition. It's meant for 70 pounds and over, because she's right at that, just under that range. But also she's got like that denser coat. So we need to factor that in whenever I'm factoring in like what collar a dog would need. I have to think about the size of the dog, if there are any behavioral issues, the thickness of the coat, the dog's stress levels, you know, is the dog moving, not moving, and that's where output comes into play. So it's the highest powered collar there is, so then you don't have to worry about anything. Okay, if she's running, if she's you know, chasing something, if she's under a lot of stress, that collar should be able to override any of those situations. Okay. Now, did you watch any of our training videos?
Yeah, I've watched some of them on your YouTube channel.
Okay.
And
So the way it works is we always start with the heel to teach e-collar, because when a dog feels e-collar, their first instinct is typically to move. So we use heel, which is a moving behavior, to teach the concept of pressure on, pressure off. So, and then it also allows the dog to move and express that need to move. So that's why it's a super effective exercise to teach. From there, we just start to shape everything else. So dogs learn best with concept of pressure. Have you ever pulled up on the collar and then pushed down on the butt to make her sit? No? Have you ever seen that happen?
I've seen that.
Yeah. So that's using pressure. And then once the dog sits, we stop everything. We stop pushing down, we stop pulling up, right? But then if the dog would get up, we would pull up and push down again to shape the sit and then release the pressure on the dog sits. So it's the same thing with the e-collar, except now she's got this thing going off. So then when she sits, it would disappear. But then if she were to get back up again, it would kick in, and then she would sit, it would disappear, okay? So she starts to learn, hey, when I feel this, if I do this, it turns off. And if I get up from that position, it turns on again.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just stay like this, nothing happens. So she starts to learn and associate how the pressure turns on and off, which creates a line of communication, okay? So like, let's say we do the healing exercise, we do the first half of heal in class 1, I give you your homework, you come back in class 2, how's it going, how's the reactivity? Oh my God, Jessie, you walked by our first dog, no problem, she was very just chilling, walked past, I go, great, good progress. Then we work on the second half of heal, or you could say like, you know what, Jessie, when we started to close the threshold and the dog was closer than like, 6 feet or whatever, she became reactive and she wouldn't stop. And I go, okay, like how high did you go on the collar to correct her? Oh, I went to 45. Okay, like, so then I gotta figure out how we're gonna address the issue. So we always, we teach the heel because it helps the dog learn the e-collar more effectively, but then also it's the foundation for reactivity, okay? So we wanna see what does that healing exercise fix? What does it resolve? And then from there, each class is kind of playing it by ear. So it's structured, but it's not like super cookie cutter. If something popped up that was more concerning and you wanted to address that, we would address that. Maybe the reactivity was worse than I expected, and you're like, yeah, like, I need to address this, whatever. You might spend a class on going over the options of addressing the reactivity. And of course, you would go out and practice anything that you learned.
Okay.
So when it comes to correcting stuff, so here, if we teach the heal and that addresses reactivity, that's what we would call an indirect approach, okay? The discipline behind the heal resolved the reactivity without having to confront reactivity, okay? Now, in other cases, we'll teach the heal and the dog will still have residual reactivity, like towards dogs being fences or dogs that lunge and bark at them first, which is normal.
Yeah.
So then we have a direct approach, which means correcting the dog for the behavior itself, okay? So like I mentioned earlier, if she did something to another dog and they disagreed with it, they would just bite her. That is a direct approach. If you try to mount me, I will bite you, right? So here with the e-collar, it can do both indirect and direct, but we always do indirect first to see what does it fix, and then if we need to, we approach things directly. So when it comes to the behavior stuff, I can only take you as far as you're willing to go. I don't expect this, but it's more so just so you're aware, because you have to be willing to do it in order to make the progress.
Yeah.
Right? So I get some pretty extreme cases, and what makes me an effective trainer and why I'm able to get results is because I'm willing to go where people aren't usually willing to go. Okay. So I have a case right now who's very human reactive, and we had his 5th or 6th class today, and he is his dog reactivity, easy peasy. That was great. His human reactivity, oh boy, he's tough. And I had to, last class, max him out, and for about 5 minutes, he was just nonstop trying to attack me before he finally caved. And he started to back off. And today when I saw him, much, much easier from the previous class. But because I was willing to go to that extreme to get him to shut down the aggression and the reactivity, is why I was able to make that progress, right? Whereas most people will be like, oh my God, is this working, or is this making it worse, right? I just go, I've seen this before, we're gonna ride it through, he's gotta give up sooner or later. Once he learns how to give up, we're able to make progress, okay? So here, let's say you come back and you're in class 3 and I'm like, how's the reactivity going? You're like, Jessie, it's still terrible with like dogs that bark at her. And I'll say like, what's the highest you've corrected her at? And you say 45, and I'm like, all right, the next time that happens, I want you to correct her at 85, right? And then you come back and then you say the same thing and they go, well, how'd you go? 55. I'm like, well, 55 is not 85, right? It's not gonna stop the behavior unless you're willing to go there. Now that's an extreme. And there's a process, like we always start low, we work our way up, and we figure that out over time. So you wouldn't go 45 to 85, like in a big jump like that. You would go up incrementally, but it's more so the comfort with going that high on the collar to correct the behavior, okay? So dog logic and human logic are not the same. Plus dogs are physically tough just because they bite each other, like that's their primary form of communication. So they already tend to be naturally physically resilient. And then the human just feels bad because they think that they're hurting the dog, but it's not about hurting the dog, it's about correcting a behavior. It's like I was raised old school, I was spanked. It didn't feel good, but it wasn't to like hurt me, it was to teach me not to do things, right? So same thing for the dog. When we're correcting him, if we're correcting him at 55 and she's still being reactive, that means 55 isn't enough. You have to be willing to go higher than that. Okay. So I always tell that to people when we're dealing with behavioral stuff. I'll tell them I can only take as far as you're willing to go. Because it does happen where a client will say like, oh Jesse, I feel bad going up higher. I'm like, well, then we're going to be stuck here for a bit because I can't change that. Right? Your dog needs more, but the client's not willing to do more. She's just getting frustrated.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be pretty straightforward, to be honest with you. Questions about your dad stuff so far?
No, I don't think so.
Are you familiar with what the e-collar is?
Yeah, I've done a decent amount of like research on it, like videos and podcasts and things like that. I've like, I don't know, I've read a lot about like using it both ways, like for recall or fixed problem behaviors. It's just I don't have one. I haven't attempted to use one. I wanted like professional guidance to do that.
Yeah. So first thing we do is get the heel. Okay, to teach her how it turns on, how it turns off. See what does that fix, and then from there, that's how we start to tweak things. Okay. So aversives are meant to stop things. So like being spanked. Then spanking is an aversive. So like if I talk back to my mom, which that only happened once in my life, because I got a consequence and it was a lasting consequence. If like I picked up my younger brother, I get spanked. If I stayed up too late, I get spanked. If I didn't come home and my mom told me to come home, I get spanked. It was like all these aversives to stop or deter things from happening again, right? So that's what aversives are meant for. So e-collar does two things. It can teach a dog what to do: sit, stay, down, come, place, heel. It can also teach a dog what not to do: don't jump, don't bark, don't bite, don't lick, don't chew, blah 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 blah. Because it's simply adding a negative to a behavior to deter the dog from doing it again.
Are those mutually exclusive? Like, can you only like teach the e-collar one way, like either as okay?
You do both.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why it's such an effective tool. So that's why we start with the heel first, because we're teaching the dog it's a line of communication, right? And then we would shape things. So the first class we're shaping the heel. We're teaching Twiggy when she feels the collar that it means to walk at your side. Okay, so we shape that first. So she understands how it turns on and how it turns off. So then if she's being reactive and the collar turns on, she goes, hey, I don't like that thing, and that thing is back. And she stops barking and the collar stops. She barks again, the collar kicks in. She's like, oh, it's back. Oh, okay, so if I don't bark, nothing happens. Okay, so then it's going to deter her from barking again. Right, but then let's say she's off leash, she's doing her doggy thing, and you call her, and she's like, now this is more fun. You also have a line of communication that says like, nope, you have to come back. Okay, so e-collar does both. It can stop things and teach her to do things. Okay, all at the press of a button, also on or off leash. Okay, so that's why for me it's the best training tool. It's also the most consistent. As long as my clients do what I tell them, that's why my success rate is so high, is because as long as they follow the instructions, more often than not, we're getting the results. The times that we don't get the results, one, the owner's not doing the homework. Like I said, they're not willing to go to that higher level to stop a behavior. Or two, I'm dealing with a dog that's just genetically screwed up. And I can only do so much with genetics, right? We make a lot of progress, but that dog just happened to be, unfortunately not a well-bred dog or whatever. And that does factor in terms of the progress that we make. But in most cases, people achieve a lot more than they think they could achieve. Because the standard for obedience is pretty low, because positive reinforcement is like the most common way that people train their dogs. And the ceiling that it has is not the greatest. It's like down here. Because again, dog going to stress, not going to listen. If there's something more rewarding, they're not going to take the food, they're going to offer that instead, right? And there's nothing that tells a dog not to do something.
Yeah.
That's what's missing. There's no consequence. If I say, hey, sit, and she doesn't sit for the treat, there is no consequence for not sitting. And that's where we have an issue, because the dog goes, okay, well, there's no motivation to actually follow through, because worst thing that can happen is I don't get food.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions?
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
So one of the most common questions I get is like, when does the e-collar go away? And in my book, it doesn't when you need it. Okay, so if she's a great dog inside the house, you don't need it. If she's a great dog in the yard, you don't need it. If when you walk her, you're going to be passing by dogs, or she's going to be off leash at a park, you need it.
Mm.
You can't account for life. You can't account for other people's off-leash dogs charging her.
Mm.
You can't account for the random person who decides to set off a firework,
Yeah.
you know, on a day that's not 4th of July. So there's a lot of factors.
Mm-hmm.
So with the e-collar, it's not that you're always having to use it, it's just that it's present.
Right.
Okay, so it's what we call opportunistic behavior. Are you familiar with that?
No.
You drive?
Yes.
You go on the expressway?
Yes.
You go the speed limit.
Kind of.
When you see a squad car, what happens?
So you slow down.
That's opportunistic behavior. Okay, when you know there's no threat of consequence, you know you can get away with things. But when there's threat of consequence, all of a sudden it's like, I'm gonna behave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for the dog. So think of the e-collar as a competent collar. When it's present, she's gonna be more obedient. She's gonna be more well behaved. She's not gonna push the boundaries because she understands there's threat of consequence. So it's nothing good or bad. It's just the way of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So like it comes from survival instinct. So if there's like a pond of water with like an alligator in it,
Mm-hmm.
and the animals around it know there's an alligator there, they don't drink the water. But when the alligator leaves, they all come in, they drink their water because they know it's safe. The alligator comes back, everybody leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunistic behavior. So here it's the same thing with the collar. When it's present, she's going to behave herself. When it's not present, she's going to push the boundaries a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So what it means is, like let's say she's doing great, and then 8 months later, you turn the corner, there's a dog. She has a quick reactive moment. You correct her, boom, you keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or she's off leash, she's running around enjoying herself. She sees a squirrel she wants to chase, and you decide, no, you can't chase that squirrel. You have a means of making a return, even if she were to try not to return. Okay?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you're always having to use it. It's just that the presence of it will change your dog's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And in any method of training, whether you're doing positive only or you're doing positive punishment, when you remove the motivator, whether good or bad, performance always dips.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if we train everything with food, and all of a sudden people will complain like, oh, when I don't have to treat the dog, it doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no motivator. Same thing with the negative. If the dog goes, hey, that collar's not on, do I really have to return? There's no consequence, right? Now we don't have a motivator. So it's just the way of the world, nothing good or bad. But that's probably one of the most common questions I get. It's just when does the e-collar go away?
Mm-hmm.
The one that we use, I use the Dogtra brand.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best collar in my opinion, or the best brand of collar in my opinion. They last for years. I've had mine for like 8 years. The only issue I've had is it's a rechargeable lithium battery, much like a cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
is that they give out after so long. So then you have to replace it and or send it to Dogtra to replace it for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a $15, $20 battery, but it lasts a few years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the most common thing that I get. Most of my clients have a collar for years and years, no issues. Okay?
Okay.
It's a fully waterproof system, both the transmitter and the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So she can go swimming in it. You could go swimming with it in your hand or whatever. It's perfectly safe.
What's like the range on it?
1 mile.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah, so it's plenty of range for the standard family pet. The reason why it's such a distance is because it's meant for hunting dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Now, if you're in the city and there's a lot of buildings, you're not going to get a full mile range, but no one lets their dog live a mile away from them.
Right.
So that's not a problem. Other questions?
I don't think so. My mind is kind of blanking on it right
No, it's
now,
fine.
but I can't think of anything.
Okay. You've done a lot of research, so that's why this is easier. Usually people have it because like you already are familiar with e-collar.
Mm-hmm.
So then I just kind of answer questions that I usually get asked because I don't need to explain the technology.
Mm-hmm.
What can happen in the beginning is you might see a influx in stress or anxiety or nervousness because the e-collar is a stressor.
Mm-hmm.
When people tend to see that, they tend to lay off the collar because they don't want to make the dog worse. But that's actually detrimental because you're exposing her to a stressor but not working her through it. Okay, so we always want to work through that stuff. One, because stress is a part of life. But then if she learns, hey, if I do this, mom will stop, she learns she does not have to listen, right? Which makes our obedience unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
So if we ever see the dog get stressed, become anxious, fearful, nervous, flighty, whatever, we always work the dog through it. Otherwise, the dog learns there's another option but compliance.
Okay.
And it sounds mean, but there is no other option but compliance, okay, because we're dealing with the dog. So if one day she took off and she's running away and you're like, hey, come back, and she's like, not today, I'm scared. now we have a problem, right?
Right.
And I've had clients' dogs take off because of fireworks. It's like the most common thing that happens. That spooks dogs. And they're able to force their dog to return because of remote collar.
Oh, yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's like, Twiggy, hey.
Sure eats a lot for a skinny dog.
I don't know, I think she like defaults to eating when she's like unsure. Because she literally just ate dinner and she only ate part of it, so I don't know what she's doing. But anyway, so yeah, so that's part of the reason I really wanted to train recall on an e-collar is because with sight hounds, people are always saying that like you can never fully trust them like off lead, and which because of like prey drive or whatever, I'm not sure exactly the reason, but I know that like with e-collar it can add that extra level of safety, which I'm not planning to like let her off lead all the time or anything like that, but if I was in like a bigger area or something like that where it was a safe area to let her off lead, it'd be able to still have that recall and send it to me.
Yeah, I hear that stuff all the time, like, oh, you can't, beagles, because they, like, their nose is so crazy.
Yeah.
It's all.
Right,
It's because they don't do e-collar.
Right.
Every dog is gonna, no matter the breed, mixed breed, whatever, is gonna have limitations on food only.
Yeah.
When you add in other variables, So, yeah, e-collar, I built my career on e-collar. And so now things have changed because of COVID. So like I used to do home to home, and then COVID happened and people were like, oh, don't come inside our house or whatever. So then I had to devise a way to train dogs, but also like the whole like touching things or whatever. A lot of people were like really conscious about that. But with e-collar, I don't even have to test a dog. I just coach you through everything. So from ground zero, building you up. So it's you, it's all hands on, it's all verbal instruction. I'm present with you, but I coach you through it so you're learning everything in the process. Previously, I would train the dog in front of you to give you a visual, and then I would work you with your dog. But then the training partially was tied to me. So like I would work the dog to like hard parts, so to speak. But then the owner didn't learn anything in terms of how to handle that, right? So now if there's a hard part, I'm walking you through it, you're figuring it out, Because when you leave in life, everything's not gonna be perfect.
Right.
You're gonna have to like figure out certain situations if she goes under stress. So you learn a lot more now. The only command that you may need help would be like the recall, because that's typically a 2-person exercise. So if it's just you and her, then I would come in and help. But you would still be doing the training. I'm just there as an extra hand to help for the recall. Other than that, everything's pretty much all on you. And then when it comes to training, you just train as you go about your life with your dog. So once you learn to heel, I'll tell you every time you walk your dog, you're gonna practice to heel now. As soon as we start teaching recall, I tell you, start walking to the park, letting her be out on the long leash and practicing recall, because it does take a long time to condition and proof. Because there's training to recall, then there's proofing to recall. And we do that all as soon as possible in the training, because it is going to take you some time to get it to be where you need it to be. And then of course the behavior stuff, like the socialization and how to introduce dogs correctly and everything, it's really just me educating you, and then you just go off and practice and repeat. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I like the aspect of me actually like learning how to train her, which I really appreciate, because like pretty early on I did like a couple consultations, and they literally, the consultation was them telling me that they could offer me board and train, and I was like, well, I kind of want to like learn in real time too.
Yeah. When it comes to board and trains, people try to sell them a lot because it's easy money. The consultation just had before you did a 10-day board and train. They were supposed to get a 45-minute follow-up, and they barely got like 5 minutes, and they don't know what the dog knows. So it's crazy. We provide a lot of follow-up for our board and trains when we do them, but this is an easy enough case, But I always encourage people, like, do it yourself because you learn a lot more. We already know how to train dogs.
Yeah.
We don't need to learn how to train more dogs, So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Anything else or any other questions?
I don't think so.
When it comes to like scheduling and stuff, Maria handles all that. So you came from the suburbs, you said, right?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to, because most of my clients meet me at Oz Park. Are you familiar with Oz Park?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want like a really busy environment, we're starting to transition to Oz Park now. Last year during summer, spring, summer, and fall, we trained at Oz Park. Then when wintertime came, we moved here. to train indoors with the snow and everything. And then now we're just starting to transition back to Oz Park, right? But it's still kind of weird because the weather is great one day, but not so great the next day. But we're transitioning to Oz, and if you want in my opinion, like the best training environment, that would be the place we'd want to meet. If you're coming from the expressway here, you know, it tack on another 15, maybe 20 minutes to your travel time. So if you're trying to like limit travel time and stuff, there is Palmer Square, which is just like 5 minutes from here. Only issue would be fitting you in on the schedule would be a little bit harder, because then I have to leave one park to go to another park, right? So whereas if I'm at House Park, I can get booked back to back because everybody's just meeting in the same spot. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you would like to work outdoors, there's also my facility here. It's a 13,000 square foot space. When it comes to transitioning or transferring the obedience to the neighborhood, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, it's very much logic based. So if like her number is 20 here because it's a controlled setting, we would anticipate her number in a uncontrolled setting or a setting with distraction would just be higher. So I give you all the information to figure all that stuff out, and then you of course would just apply it in practice, and then tell me what you get when you come back, and then we make adjustments as needed. But yeah, that's all personal preference, but Maria would get that coordinated with you. Other questions?
I did think of one question, but I also just wanted to comment that I'm also planning to move back to the city in a couple months, so it should be easier around then too, just for coordinating something like that.
Yeah. Now, are you? What month are you planning on coming back?
I'm not sure yet. It's probably gonna be it's probably gonna be July, so it might be a little bit while out.
Late summer.
Yeah, that was also part of the reason I wanted to improve her reactivity issues.
Oh, for when you come back to the city.
Yeah. Because it's a lot harder to avoid other dogs in the city. But one question I did have is, I'm like a little bit familiar just from my own research with like the e-collar technology using Mini Educator, and I was just wondering like why you prefer the dog truck over that one.
So when I first started training, I used to use e-collar technologies, but then I had a handful of aggression cases, and I felt like they were getting worse. So then I switched to dog truck, and one baby, like a world of a difference. My theory is because the Educator brand is a sharper feeling, whereas the dog brand is a duller feeling. Okay, it's over 10 years of dog training, been super consistent. You know, the client I just saw right now with the 10-day board and train dog is also on an Educator, and they're still having issues with their dog. Not uncommon that happens too, where I get a dog that's trained on the e-collar technologies, and then we swap it out for the dog truck, and we're making progress. So it's the reason why the Educator is a good collar is it's like the cheapest, highest quality collar there is. It's a good collar. You know, I'm not trying to talk bad about it, but a lot of trainers use that brand because it's easier to sell a $179 collar versus like a $300 collar. You know, and I always have to factor in all these, like I mentioned earlier, the size of the dog, the density of the coat, is there behavior issues, you know, what if the dog is under stress, and
Twiggy, what are you doing? Come here.
So like the equivalent for her e-collar technology wise would be the Boss. I'm not sure if they still call it the Boss, but it's meant for the larger, bigger dogs. They dub it as more stubborn, but I look at it as just kind of like weight class. But that one is definitely like a lot sharper than like the Doctra would be. Other questions?
I guess just like curious about the approach to I guess, I mean, I know you said working on heel for that, but just when I'm working with you, what are we going to be like working you like in a kind of like a realistic setting where we're going to be practicing that around?
Yeah, so if you meet at Oz Park is crazy busy. Have you ever been there?
No, I've just been by it.
Okay, it's the busiest park in Chicago. Dogs, people, strollers, rollerbladers, bikers, baseball games, parties, jazz bands, yoga classes. Like all this stuff is going on at the dog park, and there's like where we tend to work. There's people like to take their dogs off leash to play. We're good at distance from it, but people tend to walk by to get to that park.
Okay.
So that's why also I work at Oz Park, because we're going to be outside in a realistic setting. If you did like Palmer Square, we see dogs there, but not as busy as Oz Park. Because Oz Park is right smack dab in the middle of a residential area, and everybody and their mom takes their dog there.
Okay.
So it's super busy. So like, let's say we're in the middle of class 1, and I feel like she's gonna start becoming reactive. I would coach you on what to do, you know, like then and there. And then I just give you a structured approach of handling it when you go and do your practice versus when it's off the cuff because it just happened. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, we should be able, as long as there's people walking the dogs, we should see something to practice with. Okay.
Sounds good.
Other questions?
No.
So when it comes to this, in terms of start date and stuff, that just depends on your availability. So Maria would get all that coordinated with you.
Okay.
I know there can be a bit of a wait depending on what your availability is. My evenings and weekends, are the busiest because most people tend to work 9 to 5. So if you're looking for an evening weekend time, you're probably gonna be waiting a little bit longer. If you're looking for like a daytime, like 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock type thing, more likely you'll get started sooner because most people are working during that time frame. So Maria would figure all that out with you. You would just give her your availability. She would look at your availability versus mine, and then tell you where she can fit you in on the calendar to get started. That's pretty much it. Anything else?
I don't think so. Not that I can think of right now.
Okay. And if you think of something afterwards, you can, let us know. If it's something related to me, Maria will let me know, and I email her back an answer or whatever.
Okay.
But this should be fun. She'd be the first person I've ever trained. I've seen them, but never got around to actually training one. So this will be interesting. How old is she?
She's 3.
And you've had her since when?
I've had her for a little over a year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, she's also my first dog, so I'm new to like all the training and things like that.
So you're kind of getting thrust into the world of
Yeah, which I like it, so it's not too bad. It's just a little confusing at times.
Yeah, it's once you understand dog for dog, it really does clear up things a lot. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's easy to get stuck in the rabbit hole of misinformation.
Yeah.
And I've even had clients from other trainers and stuff, and then even there's misinformation, and these people have had been training dogs like for years. So, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. The variable here would just be her behavior in a setting with other dogs around. Is just the one that's kind of like, we don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah, I just thought of something about that. Yeah, mostly it's just, my one thing about that is I'm always on like the very cautious side. Like I don't let her like meet any other random dogs or anything like that.
Correct.
I don't really know how to read like dog body language that well, so it would just be nice to like kind of like have somebody to be able to tell me exactly what she's feeling too.
Sure. So when it comes to breeding dogs on leash, just as FYI, I'm not worried about it. It's kind of there's this thought process that dogs should love everyone and everything that they meet. That's not how it works.
Right.
Like when we go to the store, we don't say hello to everybody, right? But we're still social, but we're not like yelling at other people.
Right.
So when it comes to reading dog body language, my suggestion would be, do you have Disney Plus?
No.
No? Do you know Cesar Millan?
I know him, yeah.
The dog whisperer. If you watch his stuff, he really breaks down behavior well.
Okay.
That's actually how I learned how to read dog body language because you only have one dog, that's all you see, right? And you're only going to see what she shows you. So with watching a show like Cesar Millan's Dog Whisperer, Cesar 911, if you didn't catch something, you can rewind it and watch it again, and then watch it again, right? But also he explains everything where he's like, the dog is tense, the dog is nervous, the dog is anxious, and this triggered that. And you're kind of getting more information and you can repeat it so that you can really, take it in. which will then make reading her body language easier.
Okay.
You know, like I'm more than happy to explain stuff to you.
Yeah, it's like one of the things, it's like, so she has like one dog friend that like we've met up with a couple times, like a few times, and like it's like they'll like play bow at each other, but then she like seems to go into like a reactivity mode after that, and I just can't tell if she's playing or if like.
Oh, I see. I mean, she's probably playing, which is.
Yeah, but the other dog gets like, they're both kind of nervous around other dogs, but they like each other, so I don't want to like cause anything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, barking is part of play.
Yeah.
You know, like I'd have to like if you were to record it and send it to me, I can read it. I can like, see what's going on. But dogs growl during play, they bite during play, they bark during play. You know, it's normal. But you know,
I'm just a big worrier, so I'm always just like on the cautious side.
No, you're not the first person, you're not gonna be the last person.
Yeah.
I've been through it before. But this is just something in time as you do more with her, you get more confident with. And then I definitely recommend just like watching a show, just kind of familiar yourself with dog behavior and dog body language. Because it'll kind of help you associate and understand like what's normal versus like what's tense. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, anything else?
Thank you. You're bad behavior. No, I think that's it for right now.
Okay. So if you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, Maria will reach out. I think you'll be good with 6 classes, 2 for heal, 2 for recall, maybe 2 for behavioral stuff. And then she'll let you know the make and model of collar you would need to purchase.
Okay.
You can purchase it through us, you can purchase it through Amazon, I don't care. And then she'll get you coordinated in terms of scheduling and everything.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. It was a pleasure meeting you.
You too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. What suburb are you coming from?
Arlington Heights.